What is up, Bitcoiners? Welcome to the Build-a-Mine Podcast. This is episode 50. We are halfway to 100, guys. We are halfway there. I'm super excited. Today, we are going to be diving into a hot topic, and that's literally a hot topic. So we're diving into oil and gas flare mitigation sites, especially in the Permian Basin, where oil is a hot commodity down there. So this will be a really fun conversation. Today we have with us Paul. Paul is the CEO and co-founder of Verde Mining. Verde Mining is doing, just like I said, they're doing oil and gas flare mitigation, Bitcoin mining sites, and they also do education modules that help operators understand how oil and gas recovery, this idea of mitigating flare gas, is helpful and beneficial to not only the Bitcoin mining operators, but also to our planet and to the company at large. So a lot of the people that he works with are people who are already in the oil and gas industry, but he's also helping people who are looking to get into that sector as well. So we're going to dive straight in. Before we do, I clicked the wrong button. Before we do, here you go.
Join the Mastermind Club, a weekly gathering of Bitcoin miners sharing insights to help you optimize or build your mining business. Our community fosters open discussion and collaboration, connecting you with experts who can help you overcome challenges and find solutions faster. Every other week, we host the Mastermind Deep Dive, where industry leaders delve into the financial, operational, and optimization hurdles faced by miners like you. Brought to you by Bitcoin Mining World.
All right. Scan the QR code at the bottom of your screen to join our mastermind community. It's completely free. So, education is really important in this space. We want to educate the next generation of Bitcoin miners. That's something that Paul is also, an advocate for. So join our mastermind community. This month is, by the time this comes out, this will be January. So this month we're doing a couple of different modules on heat reuse and the Heat Punk Manifesto from Tyler Stevens. So it's going to be a great opportunity for you to learn how you can integrate Bitcoin mining into your home. So with that, Paul, welcome to the podcast, brother.
Hey, Trevor, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to your listeners and viewers.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a great opportunity for our audience to learn a little bit more about what is happening down there in the Permian Basin. What's happening in Texas? What are these wildcatters who are known for, being revolutionaries when it comes to oil? What are they finding in this new economic frontier? And so I think it'll be really cool for our audience to just kind of hear your take, especially because you're an educator in the space. I kind of alluded to that a little bit before. But before we dive into the idea of flare gas mitigation, oil and gas recovery, I just want to, give the opportunity for you to tell your Bitcoin origin story. Tell the audience, what you were doing before you found Bitcoin, how you found Bitcoin, and then that transition from fiat to Verde Mining.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I went to college for mechanical engineering. I graduated back in 2007. And at that time, I was mechanical. I wanted to do oil and gas. It was a very tight marketplace to get in with like an Exxon or a Chevron. I had moved back to Houston. That's where I grew up. And at the time, I was finding that working on the service industry of the oil and gas sector was not something that was what I had desired. So I ended up going back to grad school at University of Houston for petroleum engineering, thinking that having a master's in petroleum would get me to a petroleum job. And so this would have been 2010. And this would have been right at the time when Bitcoin would have been, the idea had been created. And I recall in grad school hearing inklings of something about Bitcoin. It never dawned on me. And I just wanted to let people know, the viewers and listeners, I'm not that early adopter. Okay. And so it wasn't until after grad school, I took a job with an oil and gas operator which ended up moving me out to Midland, Texas, which is, we call it like Afghanistan 2.0. It is a desert. It's beautiful out here, but it's where all the oil and gas is. It's what you know as the Permian Basin. And so I worked with an operator going through the ranks of production engineer, fracking to producing. And I think through that education process, you learn a lot out here in that natural gas through my career has been a problem, an issue. We always kind of thought of it as our redheaded stepchild. It's a silly saying, but it was a problem. You never really get a good fair market. It's always a problem getting it to market. And it causes problems to your actual well performance if you are having gas issues. So long story short, I kind of move on from that career of a operator, which brought me here to Midland, and resulted in moving to a group where we established basically a new entity, which was a mineral group, mineral fund. And through this process of, these are landmen, okay, buying minerals, buying leasehold, nothing producing, nothing that we operate yet, just minerals. They would, that process went along. At that time, this would have been 2016, 2017, I would have started buying Bitcoin. That's when I was first introduced. That was my kind of learn, hey, you should buy this asset. I think at the moment it was $900, and I accrued Bitcoin at that moment. Set it aside. That's in the Jax wallet. You remember those paper wallets back in the day?
I'm not quite there yet. I was a little bit newer. 22 is when I came in. So no, okay. I don't.
Okay. Well, we had these Jax wallets. It was like the paper wallet. And it was like those examples of, oh, my hard drive's in the dump and I'm screwed. And we had that. And I recall it was in 16. It was on a Jax wallet set aside, and Electrum as well. And then it wasn't until 2020 that I would come back to that Bitcoin, because that was at the moment where I had decided from an operations standpoint, I was an operator at the time, we were still having gas issues, that I wanted to try this arbitrage that I had been told about, where I could convert nat gas to electricity, because we were doing it already on the well site for other purposes. And that electricity could get utilized through this phone booth that we bought through Upstream Data, a Canadian company. Their version 1, like a stand-up phone booth, it was rated for like 90 kilowatts, and it could hold 24 miners. And that was our first iteration. I just bought everything. And I just, on a whim, I found 3 buddies who are as crazy as I was. We all threw money in. We bought 40 miners, T17 pluses, the worst ever, from Kazakhstan. I had to go into the Alcoa plant in Austin, Texas with my truck, and I picked up the pallet, brought it back to Midland, and stuck them in the container and started due diligence on ripping out boards, getting the 24 good miners out of the 40. We run that for like a year. And I'm doing an agreement at the time. Listen, I made an agreement with the operator just to go heads up 50-50 on the Henry Hub. And so whatever Henry Hub was, we were just paying them half that as a fee, and just to try this process out. And so my origin story really looks like I'm this oil and gas operator who was introduced to Bitcoin in 16, kind of sat on it, did nothing. 2020 rolls around, and I realized that I can do this arbitrage. I've been doing it my entire life. It's just retooling the applications that are already existent in the oil and gas sector. And so power generation is nothing new. And so just putting a Bitcoin mine at the end of it is new. And so collaborating to understand that is the process that is required. I was all on board from a technology standpoint. I loved it, the tinkering. And on top of that, I was able to produce, historical figures that, like, the gas is like worth like $12 per MCF. Like there's no market for that. Where was that market come from? We've only ever seen like 80 cents. And this is even better. The gas that we got was like with an operator, a family operator here locally, and they've never sold that gas on a market. Like it had always been stranded because there's a lot of ebb and flow with the market in order to do a midstream contract. And a legacy production, and legacy, I mean like stuff drilled in like before 2000, legacy production, old stuff, that's not going to get like infrastructure build out to go and get that gas to a pipeline. I mean, that stuff's already been producing for 20 years. So like, what do? Well, you don't shut it in and bury it all. It's still making good oil. It's a resource play, and it's a good one. It's just flat. It's just low flat. So in the effort to commingle, which is to grab multiple wells in the lease, they might be a couple 100 yards apart, right? A couple football fields of length apart from one another. They are just rod pumping the oil and gas and water, and that is all coming to one central location. And then we would be taking that gas as it came. And at the time they were flaring and they never sold that gas. So we came and offered them a market, and they're like, why would you say no to that? You've been producing for 15 years at $0. And then now all of a sudden you can make 50 cents or $1, or hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars. And the light bulb goes on for them. So the origin story looks like an operator getting involved into Bitcoin mining and then seeing the light turn on. And then other operators is really the opportunity here is to teach and educate those other operators that are located here in the Permian who have those gas constraint issues, whether it be flare, whether it be stranded, whether it be sour. I mean, that's a crazy one, but or maybe it's a market issue where you have a market to sell into, but they're only going to give you like $1. And if you do it yourself, you could probably make $5, and is it worth it yourself? So there's a bunch of solves here to kind of teach on. And so my origin story goes for the flare gas, kind of the most wasteful.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. Thank you so much for kind of illuminating that for us. I want to go back. So this problem of natural gas that comes from the process of mining or drilling for oil. Can you kind of tell us what that process is like? Why is there this abundance of flare gas? Why can't you get the oil without the flare gas? I kind of know a little bit about it, but I'd like to hear what you have to say on it. Kind of just explain to our listeners what that huge issue is, like that bottleneck, and then also why is gas flaring an issue for the environment, for the planet?
Sure. Okay. Yes. All right. I'll start with the production piece. So when you drill for an oil well, you're going to drill, whether it's a vertical or a horizontal well, you're going to drill straight down vertically, obviously, or you're going to drill down vertically and then you're going to curve and then drill horizontally for some mile, 2 miles. When you produce hydrocarbons, oil and gas, typically the reservoir has a temperature, right? And that reservoir temperature is hot down below the earth. It's very warm as you get closer to the core. And that temperature keeps everything in liquid form. And right now, in some of these projects, these guys are drilling enormous wells. They're drilling 8 horizontals out of 1 cellar. Think of it like you build a basement of your house. And in the basement, you drill 8 wells where you have 8 wellheads sticking up out of your basement floor. And that is 8 wells going in their respective direction 2 miles out. Okay. All of that is going to have so much production coming in. And at that moment, when you're producing like some of these operators are at that scale, even the small guys, just to show you how crazy it can get, when you have the big volume of oil, when oil drops below its bubble point temperature, again, this is just science class 101. but there's a bubble point temperature that oil is going to stay in situ in liquid form. But once you cool that oil, and it's getting cooled as you are bringing it up to surface, you're bringing it up through an ESP, an electric submersible pump, or maybe you have rod lift. That's really the two options you have right now, because we're talking about thousands of barrels, maybe an hour, or maybe per day of oil coming to surface, filling up these tanks and eventually getting pipelined, pumped out. But through that whole process of it coming to surface, hitting your facility, your tank farm facility or your tank battery, you would have tanks for your oil, and you'd have tanks for your water, and then you'd have a pipeline or a sales line for your gas. You're going to have a 3-phase separator. If you don't typically have water, then you might just have a 2-phase separator. If you're just more oil rich and just not wet, you would just deal with the oil and the gas. Okay, but the gas, what's happening? Well, as we cool the oil, gas is going to break out a solution. Yes, there are formations in this country that you can drill into that are just gas, the Barnett, the Utica, the Marcellus. Yes, you can hit like areas where it's like 100% just methane, dry gas, and it's like a Bitcoin miner's dream for sure. But that's not what we're necessarily talking about here. These guys are drilling monster wells, producing monster amounts of volume of oil. And when that oil cools, natural gas breaks out of solution. And it is immense volumes of breakout. And this happens in the wellbore, down in the reservoir. So like the moment that well got produced, that the agitation now has now created that production, is now creating a cooling event as the produced oil is making its way to the surface. As it's going to surface, gas is breaking out of the oil into solution. So now you have a GOR, a gas oil ratio, and it just depends on how much gas is breaking out. Now, on surface, back at the tank farm, the facility, all of this production is coming to the tanks, and it's being separated. Let's say there is a lot of gas and water. So we go through the 3-phase separator. Water is getting shoved over into its part of the facility to be offloaded and disposed of. And crude is obviously going to go get sold to the market. In some instances, these operators don't have takeaway for that gas. And so in order to serve some of these operators, they need infrastructure that hasn't been built yet. Or if it is built, it's already been dedicated to those who are already bigger than them 10 years prior. So we're talking like the Exxons, the Chevrons, like the pioneers of the world, right? Those groups already had the money 5-6 years ago to allocate a $1 billion pipeline. It took 3 of them to participate in it just to get it done. They're going to build as big as they can. And by the time it's built, it's at capacity. It hasn't even, the wells are already ready to produce into that. So everyone else is kind of stuck with this conundrum that they don't have the infrastructure and they have to burn. So the burning piece is just a result of, it's not poor due diligence or anything like that. It's not lack of that. The marketplace is just very hard. It's very hard to put in a pipeline in 2025, and it's going to be even harder as years go on. But no one really ever understood, I guess, how prolific the Permian Basin is going to become and how it could be. And now with how much production we have, the idea now is to push agendas to stave off that waste, right? And so at the moment, most operators are shut in. And and I'm concerned that that approach stifles innovation to do like what we're trying to do and give them an out. So the gas coming to surface for those folks will either be diverted into a sales line if one exists, and if it doesn't, then it's going to go to flare, like I said. Now, what is flared gas? Well, the flare gas is just like, obviously, like I just explained, the byproduct of oil dropping below bubble point. And in that gas, you might have NGLs, natural gas liquids, more like water droplets that are very flammable. Your propanes, your pentanes, and above all, your CH4, your methane, the most important part of this whole burn process that we are even going to get to. Well, when the guys are flaring out of those awesome flare combustors, those flare stacks, as we like to call them, there's a twofold thing. One, you have to get a permit with the state because the process of flaring is a state regulated, permitted process. And in additional, you have to understand that when you are burning that flare, most combustors that I've seen on the market, as in 2025 innovation, technology, whatever, is probably burning about upwards of 90% of the gas that you now are taking to that flare or to that candle, right? And so what that 10%, that little delta that you're not burning, maybe sometime when you're out in the field, if you have oil and gas flares in your neck of the woods, a good little fun thing to look at is if you're looking at that orange flame and there's a bunch of black coming off of it, they're burning liquids, right? And you don't want that. They want to have stripped that out, right? Because that's also got market value. But some instances, they don't even have the market for that. So they just burn everything that isn't crude. And so let's fix that, right? That 10% delta is, remember, we are like on our site, like we burn and we kind of calculate an ideal of like what the CO2 equivalent abatement is. Remember, when you're mining on gas, you're not abating CO2, okay? It's CO2 just goes through your engine and comes out the exhaust. It's not bad. The trees like CO2. But what we are calculating when you're doing flare mining is you're calculating the CO2 equivalent. So it's CO2e. And that CO2 equivalent is like the tonnage equivalent of CO2, but in methane, NGLs, pentane, hexane, the C1 through C4, like whatever your composition of your gas is, that is burning that 10% is what you're not burning, is this equates to this volume, this tonnage. When you run it on the Bitcoin mine side, I'm able to burn and combust in my closed loop system like 99.99 efficacy on that burn of gas, where the flare is only doing 90%. So that emittance of that 10% for every ton of CO2 that is going through my engine, right? You can equate that it's going to be 29 times the volume in methane. So for every ton of CO2 that everyone wants to hoop and holler about, know that at the same instance, 29 tons of methane, CH4, went. And remember, the CH4 is the greenhouse gas. That is what sits up in that ozone layer and takes millions of years to disintegrate and actually does create those holes. So we want to mitigate methane release, and we'd want to be more, have more efficiencies in keeping that, not airborne. And so again, that's the process of the gas, where the gas is coming from in some of the Permian Basin wells.
Yeah. So this methane's the real environmental problem in the world today. A lot of people are talking about methane emissions, coming from cow farts and cars and all these things. So by burning, just so that I'm on the right track here, by burning the methane, in a generator, this actually mitigates this whole idea of methane going into the atmosphere. Am I correct there?
Yeah. So there would be, yes, it would think of it more as like an abatement. So like I am not 100% pure. I haven't made this solution to 100% efficacy. I think later on, maybe that comes, but I am, yes, abating all of that nasty stuff that otherwise a flare is allowing to happen. So
got you. That makes a lot of sense. And thank you for that detailed explanation, because I now have a better understanding of why this whole market of oil and gas flare mitigation is happening, why this is a new ecosystem, a new it's rolling out. These last few years, this whole idea of flare gas recovery mitigation has been rolling out in the Bitcoin mining space, and it makes a lot of sense. And I hear this a lot. I hear this so much in the spaces in Bitcoin mining, is that if you're an environmentalist, really, you should also be a Bitcoiner. And this makes complete sense, because Bitcoin, and I'm going to touch on this a little bit, Bitcoin has this great incentive model of aligning all these incentives with the monetary premium and making people's lives better. What you guys are doing in the Permian Basin with Verde Mining is a perfect example of this. But also, there's methane mitigation sites at landfills. There's methane mitigation sites on farms, where they're literally taking methane out of cow shit and they're turning that into Bitcoin. And then there's even this new one that maybe some of the audience has seen, but we have a video at Bitcoin Mining World where there's a site that is using pyrolysis to break down tires, so heavy duty rubber, break this down into 3 different parts. And those parts are, 4 parts, but the parts are, the metal from the tires, the rubber from the tires, and then methane and diesel. And they're able to use the methane and the diesel to mine Bitcoin and transport rubber. So it's this beautiful symbiosis. And the reason I bring that up is just because the methane mitigation and the flare gas mitigation sites that are popping up all over the place. I mean, they're putting out these flares, and they're, in a sense, I don't really want to get this esoteric, but in a sense, they're saving the world. They're saving the planet. They're helping to reduce greenhouse gases and carbon emissions. And so it's this beautiful relationship that I'm seeing in the space. And, I love what you guys are doing when it comes to Verde Mining and how you guys are making this happen. I kind of want to touch on, Verde Mining specifically. You kind of told us how you got into it from this symbiotic relationship between oil and gas and what you were doing, and just trying to find a way for that to use that nat gas. But where is Verde Mining at right now? Like, how many sites do you have, and what are some of your main prerogatives, in your business? What's your ethos?
We have one site that we are running. It's the same existing site. We've been running it pretty consistently for the last 2.5 years. We are coming up on our 3rd year. We have a lot of decisions to make on contract renewal, which is a good thing. The operator is very happy with what we've been doing. Scaling looks like a little bit of a different puzzle. Now, when we were starting the mining, we were in 2021, and then we did a fundraise to pass the hat, sort of friends and family fund, and bought equipment to put out the flare in its entirety. And at the time, it was about 150 MCF a day. And so the project was that to go after intermittent flare, to solve a operator's ask, not to go get the cheapest gas and to get the cheapest electricity as a Bitcoin miner, but to be one step even further and be like, well, I can solve this. And if I wanted to, I guess I could run a Tesla charger and charge people's cars, and that could be our money. But no. That's stupid, man. That's not consistent. Bitcoin was the option, that was the commodity that's available. And it made sense to go after that Bitcoin, for as a business. And so you kind of go forward. I have the desire to put out the flare. And so we do that. And education comes next. Now we got to start teaching people about, what we're doing. Everyone at the time is mining on grid. Big establishments are going in on grid. And but gas hasn't really been touched yet. And remember, we also went through a really awesome summer where gas was like $7 per MCF, but in the last 3 years, that was pretty awesome. And that would have wrecked me if I had to pay $7 per MCF for my gas at the Bitcoin mining site. And I'm just saying that, I think timing is everything in this marketplace. It happens for a reason. but a lot of the stalling or the lack of having 10 sites under our belt typically falls under operators. I'm an operator. I'm oil and gas. That's all I know. And in my dealings day to day, when I was operating my wells, I would have to go and get into these contract agreements with midstream. And if I'm a new guy, a new operator in the space, and right, like 10 years, not 30 years, I may sign something that, hurts others down the road. And long story short, a lot of these operators in 2024 are finding that their contracts that they signed in 2012 that dedicated their acreage to some midstream pipeline, where the pipeline was willing to spend, $200 million in 2016 to build a pipeline that'll cost $1 billion today. That 200 million, they did it for those guys, right? Just for that leasehold. And so that acreage dedication is like, you can't mess with that. So I just want to let your listeners and viewers know that there's so much gas that is wasteful. There's so much flared gas that is wasteful, but it's not always the operator's fault. Sometimes the operator has a pipeline that they can sell into, but the pipeline goes down. Somewhere on that pipeline, the processing plant goes down and they can't accept any more gas. And that causes a domino effect up the line. And then you see flares turn on because the crude can't stop producing. And so, but this midstream pipeline wasn't supposed to go offline. And so I think you just have, the marketplace kind of not understanding what was going to come around the bend. And so you have midstream contracts that preclude folks like you and I who are just entrepreneurial in spirit and have a desire to solve. And at this point, we do want to go after cheap power, but we can get twofold out of this. We can solve for something that is environmentally hazardous while at the same time benefiting the operator in that. And then one more step, if you want to go after the carbon credits and stuff, that's a whole nother avenue. Then there's another caveat of helpful rhetoric that we can speak to. And I mean, these operators would have said, yes, I want to mine Bitcoin, or, hey, Paul, I want to take my gas and sell it to you guys and not flare. Like, we can't even produce it in New Mexico. If you flare, it's not allowed. So there's operators in New Mexico and Eddy and Lee County that have thousands of barrels a day in production per lease shut in because they don't have a solution for that gas. There's no pipeline. And they're calling, now saying, hey, can we do a deal? And in some of those cases, those guys have a pipeline commitment and they can't get out of it. So I think education is a big part of this. And when we got into the game, myself in 2020, I was very uneducated about kind of what Bitcoin needed from the operator. At the same time, what the operator was requesting from the Bitcoin miner, right? I need cheap power under circumstances that dictate that I can have a contract here. That contract is going to be just like a midstream contract, but I'm not going to make you dedicate your acreage to me. I only need 3 years, 3 to 5, and then we can renew after that. And I'm here to help you. And I'm here to create a market for you. And then I'm here to make you look like the good guy. That's kind of like what the antithesis of Verde Mining is. So now at this point, the scaling looks more like educating a lot of folks. And now a lot of these operators are calling back to say, hey, we are interested in doing that. Can you send us a model on what it would look like if we owned a piece of it? And then we're like, yes, absolutely. This is where we're finally at. The opportunity where you take ownership of your own asset and then you mitigate that for the greater good. And then it's going to benefit you. And that's what proof of work is all about. You reap what you sow. And let's get into this. Let's do it. And so now I see a better need of to not, sandwich myself into one pocket, more so to go out there and help any and all who want to mitigate methane, who want to find a better market for their methane. Maybe they want to arbitrage what they got going on. I'm not going to get in the weeds of what you have. You bring the gas, I'll bring the team. That's sort of where the collaboration works now. And so I
Yeah.
think it's the education comes first, and then the stacking and scaling benefits from that. And so that's where
Do
we are.
you think that like this ethos that you're building this around, like, helping owners and operators like actually own the physical asset instead of instead of creating contracts that are not beneficial to themselves and others? Do you think that kind of comes from the ethos of Bitcoin, or is that something that's just always inherently been inside of you?
Oh, that's a really good question. You know, I always felt like as a nerd gamer that I was one that always trying to find maybe the shortcut in some sort of aspect of life, whether it be a video game itself or maybe like how to play the game to better advance my career. Right? I mean, there's games are everywhere in our lives. Can you ask that again, please? Because that's a really good question. Can you ask that again, please?
Yeah, sorry, we just cut out a little bit. So my question is, do you think that the ethos of Bitcoin, this idea of everybody survives because of the incentives built around Bitcoin, kind of plays into how you help owners and operators own their
Yeah.
own assets, or is this something that just kind of was always inherent within you?
I think it sprouted out as a result of foundation and education and just historical experiences that I had. I don't think I was like always destined to be this like Bitcoin guy or this nut. I honestly um, saw an opportunity in the power, and through connections and contacts, I was able to leverage the opportunity to arbitrage that. And as an engineer, I should be looking for a solve on everything. And look, gas has really been a problem for us in the Permian Basin. Like it really is an issue. There's folks that just don't get a fair market, man. That's not right. And what's also like all gas has value, even sour gas. If it can burn in an engine and make power, then then it's valuable, right? Let's
Mhm.
stop the argument there. Now, if you want to give me your gas for free so that other things can happen, cool. That's just going to benefit the project and probably make it go faster. But the whole the whole thing of me inherently growing up and like arbitraging everything in my life, that really wasn't me. I was more foundationally driven to learn everything that I could possibly learn and tinker with a lot of things. Bitcoin came up out of nowhere and slapped me across the face.
As it
And it
does.
was my risk. It was my level of risk tolerance that I have in my life is more so my mojo that got me over the edge to go put in $100,000. That's what we spent on like four of us to buy a container and 40 used miners. And had I not done that, I honestly don't know where I would have been today. And through
Mhm.
that risk, it exploded into everything that I had felt like I learned in my life was like, oh my gosh, I can do it here. I can do it here. Like, where do I start? And you're like, dude, you start on the gas. That's where you start. And you let other people focus on the other stuff. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
does that help answer?
No, it does. It does.
Okay.
I have this belief that like human beings, and this isn't something that I'm like the first person to say this. Like this is something that I took from someone else, and I don't remember who I took it from. But I believe that humans are incentive driven creatures, and when we are incentivized to do one thing, we will do it. When we are incentivized to do another thing, we will do it. I mean, I think there's an inherent beauty in human beings that we want to be open and free and giving and respectful and loving and all these different things, like the good of man. But at the end of the day, like, we're gonna look out for ourselves. We're gonna look out for our
Sure.
families. We're gonna look out for our bottom line first. So when you have something like Bitcoin mining, and this whole incentive stack that comes with methane mitigation and environmental you know impact resources, whatever it is, when you have this stack of incentives on the Bitcoin network, on people who are inside of the network working to build better lives, it just creates this virtuous cycle of prosperity and economic incentives for all. And so I think it's a beautiful thing that we're starting to see play out. And the more that Bitcoiners are going out there and doing these really cool projects like methane mitigation, flare site mitigation, hydropower collection, whether it's geothermal, solar, whatever it is, you're seeing a lot of really cool things that are happening. And long-winded way of getting to this whole educational aspect. You've talked several times, you've alluded to it, education is the most important thing in the space because we need to decentralize the space. Bob Burnett, who is somebody that you've listened to and that I am very fond of, his ideas, he talks about horse class, rabbit class, and elephant class miners. And, I'm a rabbit. I have one machine, two machines that I run in my house, but you're a horse. You're somebody who's, building out a megawatt, 5 megawatts, maybe even 10 megawatts over the course of, your life. And it's a beautiful thing what we're having happen here in the space. But the only way that can proliferate is by people like yourself educating more and more operators. So let's kind of dive into this educational module and this educational class that you do. Like, how are you educating operators? Is it an aspect where like you put on a class and they come to you, or are you going out to different operations and like trying to onboard these operators into Bitcoin?
So we have we have a class that we put on here in Midland, and folks would come to us. And typically right now, I would say 95% of our class students in the last 2 years have been entrepreneurs, students between the ages of, I want to say 28 and 45. And they have the intent to go out and create a mine or build a mine at a scale of what I'm kind of showing and training on. And so we haven't yet started making training deals with operators, although that would be the greatest next step. Mm-hmm. When an operator takes on their own program, it would be great for them to send their pumpers out through us and get the training on the mining. And let's just be honest, Bitcoin mining is pretty easy and straightforward. There's fun nuances that you can like get yourself in the weeds with, right? But like, you run Foreman, you run Starlink, you run your miners. You could be an operator and not know what the heck you're doing and have those collective pieces all together in the puzzle, and it'll run a fantastic operation for you, and you wouldn't be the wiser. What's really important though is keeping that engine on, because unlike the other sites, like these sites are 24/7. It's 99.9% uptime, right? So the operator knowing this stuff hasn't yet happened yet. So our student base is typically finding themselves to do it for an operator, possibly in their neck of the woods. They could turn into a Verde Mining essentially themselves. Mm-hmm. And it's really a course that takes you through all the oil and gas rhetoric to the mining aspect. And what the emphasis here is to educate you on the oil and gas feature, while you can approach an operator while never having operated yourself. It would be prudent of you and wise to possibly surround yourself with folks that have. And what or who are those folks? Well, I could tell you, and I don't know your life from the other guy. I just know that if you follow this directive, that you will come to the same conclusion that we did. And there's a lot of steps, I feel like, in the process of acquiring an oil and gas Bitcoin mine, specific compared to a on-grid, on-core AEP grid site mine, right? So on the gas side, we really educate the folks on the SUA, like the contracts you would expect, surface use agreements, master service agreements, what sort of maybe deal structure you might want, or you may run into. You might have an idea of how to pay for this project out to people, but the operator may have a different mindset. Are you well versed in the lingo within the financial markets specific to oil and gas? We kind of give you the lingo there. We don't want you to trip on yourself while you go out there and present whatever it is that you are going to be taught. We want to educate you and prepare you as best we can. And so there's a lot of features on, like I said, the team, landmen, reservoir engineers, mechanical engineers, pumpers, your librarian. Anybody with the desire to want to work is going to be needed in this process, but it also caters to possibly some of the more technical folks. And if you have those folks on your team, it's going to be very helpful. And if you don't want to take any of those folks up, then maybe you come back to us later on and we consult and help you get your project online after the fact. But the education piece is very important in not only distinguishing like what it takes to mine on gas, but do you actually want to do this? Did you realize that you needed to do this? The insurance, are you ready for that? Did here's the equipment to expect to purchase. When you purchase this, it's $10,000 a unit, not $10, right? There's a lot of more nuance having many more parts and movement on a natural gas site compared to just turning the switch on a grid site. And so monitoring, maintaining, maintenance of your engine. The engine is the heart of your whole process. The generator is more important than the Bitcoin, because without the generator, you're not getting any Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. So understanding kind of like where your values lay on a project of that nature. And then I really just hype on the fact that if you're coming in and learning from me, like you are the type of person that also sees where gas is a great opportunity, and you are also out there to serve that operator in this need that they have where they may not be able to solve it for themselves. And you are just, the light bulb went on in your head, a year earlier than theirs. And through you, the light bulb will turn on for them. And we hope that under no circumstance does somebody go and burn down a well site for putting a Bitcoin mine out there when they were cutting corners because they weren't following like simple little OSHA standards. Not that you have to, not that it's regulated, but because you care and because like you reap what you sow. And so the education piece is like a really big part in that. And like, I don't want anybody to get hurt. And I don't want any of the operators to get sour at a Bitcoin miner, especially when we've only been around for like 6 years in the gas sector. Give us some time to really proliferate the space. And I don't want somebody to like shut us out and be like, oh, they're bad for the oil and gas community, get rid of them. No. It's the opposite. We're here to help, and education comes first, and then the army of workers comes second, right? And so solutions all over the place.
Yeah. We at Bitcoin Mining World, like we're huge proponents of education and growing networks. We believe that education, for the most part, I mean, it should be as cheap as it possibly can, because the cheaper that the education is, the more that we can proliferate the operators and the students and that education outward, which, it's an incentive because it turns back around and grows the network. It decentralizes the space. And then also that, profit side of it is like we as resellers of mining equipment, like if we educate a miner, they're more likely to come purchase their equipment from us, so there is that monetary side of it. But at the core, the essence is that we want to raise the next generation of Bitcoiners and miners and give them, as you said, like the proper footing, because the last thing that we want is for someone to get over their skis and realize that A, this is not for them, they don't want to do this, or B, go out there and act a fool and look like a jackass because they don't know what they're talking about. Sure. So education is so important. And I think that, at the foundational level of what you guys are doing at Verde Mining, trying to proliferate the oil and gas industry when it comes to Bitcoin mining is very admirable. It's respectable. And, I'm like super grateful for what you guys are doing. And, I just want to say that. I just want to, show my appreciation.
Appreciate that.
How can people, if anybody's listening to this and they are very curious about the things that you've had to say, how can they kind of reach out to you about this training course? Maybe they want to get into oil and gas, or they are already in oil and gas and they want to learn how Bitcoin mining is a viable solution for them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we have a website, verdemining.com, and we are constantly updating it. It's nothing fancy, so please don't judge us. But it's a good measure for you to go. You can go to verdemining.com and see on the next trainings that are coming up. We have not picked our dates for 2025, but that will be put up there, I imagine, probably in the first week or two of January. We also have LinkedIn, Verde Mining, right? VERDE, like the color green in Spanish. You can search us on LinkedIn. You can also search us on X or Twitter under the same banner of Verde Mining. If you want to email me, it's very simple. It's paul@verdemining.com. And I would be happy to answer anyone's questions, anyone's requests. I mean, if you have a project that's currently going on right now that you want some consultation on, be happy to take you up on that as well. So those would be the process through which you could check out about the training. And if you just want to get direct contact with me, for sure, that's your best approach.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that, Paul. I hope that, people take that to heart and, reach out to you, because you're a wealth of information. And you're very, the way that you enunciate yourself and the way that you, provide context on all of this is very illuminating for someone, especially like myself, who I'm not the brightest tool in the shed, or the brightest crayon in the box, the sharpest tool in the shed. So like sometimes it takes a while for me to understand things, but like, man, it felt like I was like following you the entire time there. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Like I get it now, like light bulb. So I just want to say, I appreciate your take on it, man.
I've had time to practice that, but I will say that like Bitcoin and this aspect of flared gas mining or just natural gas mining is, can meet you where you're at. Let's put it that way. Like, yeah. And that's probably the most amazing thing about Bitcoin in my life is that there's no barrier to entry. Just because you don't have a master's degree or something, you don't need it. You need to just care about what you're doing, and you got to be willing to learn. And then you got to find folks like us who are willing to educate. And I think that's it. That's it. And so I love that about Bitcoin, and any way I can help, reach out.
Yeah. Well, we're closing up here. It's getting to the top of the hour real quick. And if you've listened to any of the podcasts in the past that we've done, you would know this is going to happen. I ask every guest that comes on this show the same question. And the reason I ask this question is because everybody comes to Bitcoin from a different lens. We all come to Bitcoin for different reasons. We all have different beliefs. So my question to you, Paul, is what does Bitcoin mean to you?
That's a really good question. So I think over the last 8 years, as I've grown more to like involve my life into Bitcoin, I think as Michael Saylor would say, I tell my parents I'm a 2X maxi. There's a financial freedom that I have seen through it. There is an opportunity to leverage a playing field that I've never in my life. My family is not a wealth family. We don't come from wealth, none of that. We've all worked hard to get where we are. I'm not a third generation of anything. And to me, this is one of those things where for the first time in my life, I can see firsthand the benefits of proof of work, and if I reaping what I sow. So if I'm sowing good due diligence, then I'm going to reap good due profit. And through this, what does that look like? It looks like bettering my life through my relationships that I've had. The people that I've met in the community of Bitcoin are just different level set minded folks. The engineers come with a different passion again. It's like, it's a life that I can't explain to other folks because everyone sees it in a different light. But I hope that at the bare minimum, everyone sees it as like an inviting love, like open arms, and like we're here to help. And the attraction of my hard work, and I can see the fruits of my labor. And then now I can absolutely show my daughters the same rhetoric of kind of what it looks like in the future now, to kind of be, you know, our parents had it one way. Now we are figuring out this other way. And thank heavens it's something as amazing as Bitcoin. But regardless, it's like that. It's not just the commodity. It's not just the real estate or whatever you want to call it, the real property. It's like what everything else that comes with it. And I think if you miss the forest for the trees, the community for the dollar amount of Bitcoin, you are just completely like, you know, missing the greater opportunity to better not only your life, but others. And so to me, Bitcoin is, you know, without getting cultish about it, a real form of opportunity that we haven't had in our lifetime. And I want to grab as much of it as I can. And teach my girls.
Yeah, no, it's, you know, there's, I don't think I could really have even put that as well as you did. Bitcoin's a beautiful thing, and it's incentives all the way up and incentives all the way down. And it's changing the way that we look at the world. I look at my short time in Bitcoin, and I look at my life before Bitcoin versus after Bitcoin. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt, with 100% certainty, that in the last 2 years, a little over 2 years, I have become a better person. My life has become more full of joy and life and love and just hope.
Yep.
Really, at the end of the day, hope. So it's a beautiful thing that we got going here, man. And I can't wait to see, you know, the proliferation of projects happening around the world, doing things like flared gas, doing things like methane mitigation. And it's going to be beautiful, man. Agreed. So, well, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. I really appreciate your time. Guys, this has been episode 50 of the Build-a-Mine podcast. If you liked this show, if you have watched the show, please like, comment, subscribe, share it out to your friends and family, let them know, especially if they're getting into Bitcoin mining. We want to share this message and this information as much as possible. And, also I just appreciate everyone who's helping me to grow this podcast. It's been a labor of love. It's taken a long time to get where we are. And obviously we're not a huge podcast, but it's fun. And I really enjoy it. So I thank you,
You're doing
Paul.
an awesome job.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'm just doing my best, just doing my part to spread the needle.
You're doing great. And thank you for this opportunity. And thank you to all your viewers and listeners. I hope everybody has a great Merry Christmas.
Yeah. Stick around in the green room after this real quick. Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, guys. This has been the Build-a-Mine podcast. We will see you on the next one. Take it easy.
Please note, the Build-a-Mine podcast provides information for general educational purposes only. This information should not be construed as legal, financial, or investment advice. We do not guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information presented, and we encourage you to consult with a professional advisor, legal advisor, and/or financial advisor before making any financial decisions. The Build-a-Mine podcast and its affiliates are not responsible for any losses incurred as a result of using the information provided.